Hello and welcome to Neuroshambles, the podcast that aims to shine a light into some of the murkier corners of what it's like to parent neurodivergent kids. I'm Mark Allen, and every episode I'm going to be swapping stories with my guests about some of the frankly ludicrous nonsense we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, if you're anything like me and you're feeling frazzled, overwhelmed and pretty much an outcast from polite society, join me. Hello and welcome to episode 1 of Neuroshambles. First things first, thank you. Thanks for listening, because obviously listening to episode 1 of any podcast is a bit of a shot in the dark, isn't it? And I'm hoping that your leap of faith is going to be well rewarded by the end of this podcast. I guess I should start by saying a little bit about myself. I'm Mark Allen. I'm a lapsed stand-up comedian, now very active parent of 3 wonderful hooligans. I've got 2 boys. Jay is 10 and he is diagnosed autistic with ADHD. And I've also got Otto, who is 8, and he's also diagnosed with autism and ADHD, though he presents very differently to his brother. So that's already a bit of fun in our household. I've also got a 6-year-old daughter, India, who is suspected neurotypical. I say suspected because I have learned by now not to count my chickens. I'm going to wait and see how this one plays out before I make any real judgments on this. Now, we all live in Brighton with my former partner, Tam, who is mother of all 3 kids and an all-round excellent human being who I enthusiastically co-parent with. Tam has also recently realised that they are neurodivergent with autism and ADHD flavours, so it is all going on in our house. Now, being a neurotypical myself, there is a giddy melting pot of differently wired brains at play there, and it leads to what I affectionately term the Neuroshambles in our household, which obviously gave me the name of this podcast. Now, in the world of podcasts, as I'm sure you already know, there are loads of ones out there that provide an in-depth look at neurodivergent kids and offer practical advice on how to parent them and all that guff. And many of them are brilliant and insightful and super helpful, but that is not what Neuroshambles is. If that is what you're looking for, it's not the place for you. I'll level with you. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm just making it up as I go along. Because there's no real rule book for raising a neurodivergent family, is there? Now, what you will get from this podcast is a very honest discussion about the day-to-day challenges that I face, and I'm going to be talking to other guests to get an insight in what they're dealing with as well, because obviously everyone's setup is very different. Autism presents very differently, and ADHD presents very differently, and people kind of handle that in different ways, and that's what I'm kind of interested in getting to the bottom of a little bit more. But essentially, I'm hoping that this is a place for people to be able to share stories from the front line of parenting neurodivergent kids. Tales from the trenches, if you like. And I'm going to try and keep it light-hearted and fun, and as fun as it gets, obviously, because sometimes there's going to be serious stuff that comes with the territory of what we're talking about sometimes. But I'll try not to take it too seriously, because that is very easy to do in our situation, and I think we could all do with a little bit of light and positivity occasionally, and that's what I'm hoping this is going to be. So yeah, that pretty much sums up me and the podcast. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our first guest, but before I do that, I should probably add a trigger warning at this point to say that there will inevitably be swearing throughout the podcast and throughout the entire series. Now, I can't imagine that's going to offend many parents of neurodivergent kids, because I'm sure we've experienced a lot worse than a few F-bombs, but I think I should warn you anyway, just to let you know. So now that's out of the way, without further ado, I'd like to meet our first guest after this generic swoosh.
Meet the guest.
So, I am delighted to welcome to the first episode of Neuroshambles our first Meet the Guest contender, who is the wonderful Joe Matthews. Hi, Joe, how are you doing?
Hello. Yeah, I'm good. I am good.
Welcome to the show. I suppose a bit of context is I know Joe from Just local neurodivergent circles, I guess.
Yeah,
In
it's a
the
cool gang to be in.
It is very much so. So you know my kids very well now,
Mm,
since we crashed into your life about 2 years ago,
mhm.
and obviously I know yours, so we'll be kind of talking about that. But
Yeah.
obviously, for the listeners who don't know your setup, can you just describe a little bit about the neurodiversity going on in your household?
So in our household, our eldest George is 20, and George. It seems weird to say we were very lucky in that he didn't speak. He couldn't speak until he was about 3.5 or 4, and that
Right,
got us fast tracked into the system. So he was diagnosed just after his 3rd birthday.
and
Um,
diagnosed with
he's
autism.
autistic, and then more recently, he's also been diagnosed with severe ADHD, which we sort of always knew, but it hadn't
Hmm.
caused him any difficulties. So here we are. And then Dottie, my girl, is nearly 17. And she was first referred when she was 4 and was diagnosed eventually when she was 10. And Dottie
Whoa.
is
Okay.
autistic with sensory processing disorder and quite a few sort of physical health issues that seem to go hand in hand with autism in girls.
It took 6 years to
6 years
diagnose Dottie.
of going backwards and forwards, and
Because obviously girls didn't have autism back in those days, right?
no, oh no, they were just quirky or copying their brother, or quite a few hearing tests because, oh well, maybe she's deaf. And yeah, it's such a strange experience having one of each and just seeing that difference
Yeah.
in, and then resources as well, because George, being a boy, everything was external. So he kicked and bit and threw chairs and caused havoc everywhere he
Hmm.
went, especially school. And therefore, he had resources piled on him
Right. Yeah.
because he was causing problems for other people.
Hmm.
Dottie was the kid crying in the corner and wasn't causing any trouble for anyone. So, again, that uphill battle to get resources and to get what she needed.
Yeah.
Anyway, but here we are, happy, healthy, kind of thriving,
You
surviving.
are. I think you are. You are. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And in terms of sort of the rest of the household, because obviously we've got a neurodivergent, Tam is autistic with ADHD. I'm neurotypical, so it's a bit of a collision of
I'm so
neurotypes. What about your?
sorry. That must be hard.
Well, now I'm very used to it now. I don't know anything else, do I? Let's face it.
Yeah, you were born that way. It's not your fault.
Exactly. Just try and tolerate me if you can, Joe.
God, I'll do my best.
What about your household?
So neither of us have sought formal diagnoses, but again, that really interesting difference, because as soon as George was diagnosed, we both said, "Oh, wait a minute, Phil's autistic too," and was just really obviously he used to tiptoe walk when he was anxious,
Oh,
and
really? And that is like
yeah,
a classic sign, isn't it?
yes.
But
So
usually in kids, does he do it as a grown up?
yeah, he's stopped now, weirdly. But when I first met him, I used to go, "Why are you on your tiptoes all the time?"
Were you making him anxious all the time, Joe?
Yeah, apparently so. And then also, he was really odd. I just thought he was joking, but I can't think of a solitary example now. But so yeah, Phil. As soon as George was diagnosed, we had that light bulb moment of, "Oh,
Hmm.
wait a minute," and then I it's interesting, Dottie, from about the age of 12, has been saying to me, "Mum, you do know you're autistic, don't you?" And I've been, at first, was like, "No, don't be daft. I'm sociable. I'm, outgoing. I'm loud." And then the more I've learned about women and girls, and the more
Mm.
I've thought about the amount of times I say the wrong thing and don't realise I've done it, I upset people, or I I don't know when it's my turn to talk ever.
That's going to make a fun podcast then.
Yeah, this is why I'm a bit worried. 'Cause we need a code word which could just be "shut up, Joe."
I could just say that, can I? No, I'm not going to do that, obviously.
And yeah, so I've sort of gradually realised, hang on a minute. And then all of the things that I just thought were me being an arsehole, like, I don't know, I see rules as suggestions that I may or may not follow, dependent on how I'm
Yes.
feeling. I don't care who anyone is. If I think they're wrong, I'll argue with them. All of those traits that I just thought were me being deeply flawed, Dottie says, Mum, you're autistic and you're a bit demand avoidant. And yeah,
Yeah.
so it's interesting. We're an interesting household.
Yeah, I've stopped second guessing now. Like anyone, it's just like people may be neurodivergent, they may not. I might as well just assume that that's just part of whoever they are and
Yeah.
whatever they are. Because Tam, we just assumed that Tam was neurotypical for years,
Yes.
and then sort of just scratching away and going, oh, actually, this is slightly neurodivergent. And then just the more we understood about autism,
Yes.
the more we kind of recognize so many traits, and they contextualize so much stuff. It doesn't change Tam, and it doesn't change kind of my relationship with Tam and my friendship with Tam, but it was quite an interesting kind of eye opener, I think, a couple of years ago when we realized that.
Yeah. And I
I feel
think,
left out in my house, to be honest.
well, I mean, could you just try to
I
behave in
know.
a more autistic way? I think for me, and even though I don't really feel that I can lay claim to that identity, if that makes sense,
Hmm.
but the more I sort of think, oh, yeah, I do have that trait, it's almost like I then am able to stop beating myself up about things and to think,
Yeah.
well, actually, that happens because I can't help that. And therefore, I'm not lazy. I'm just, and I'm not I'm chaotic in life. And I used to beat myself up, but now I think more like, well, actually, I'm probably not.
I'll be honest, that is why I feel so comfortable in your presence, Joe. I'm
Mm,
really because you own you own your chaos. I guess that's a really strange way of putting it, but you are just like, this is who we are.
yeah,
This, like, I'm not going to change that. This is who we are, and accept us or you don't. But I'm not going to change it, and that's for someone early on in the sort of journey of autism and my kids, that felt so weirdly empowering to 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 have someone just sort of own it, because I'm as a neurotypical, I spend so much of my time trying to kind of tamp down the behavior of my kids in
yeah,
certain social situations,
yeah,
and getting really anxious about it and wanting them to behave in inverted commas normally, that to see you just kind of going, yeah, this
yeah,
is who we are. Stop.
yeah.
Is so, like, it was just so empowering, and it was so kind of inspiring. So I think that's definitely helped me on my journey.
I was really lucky in that. So when George was very first diagnosed, I think I went through something a lot of parents probably go through, of thinking, oh, this is awful, this is a disaster, I'm going to fix it. So
Hmm.
I was online looking for, how do I fix this? And I stumbled across a group called Aspies for Freedom. And I don't know if they still exist, but they were one of
Okay.
the very, very early autistic acceptance groups who were
Okay.
saying, we're autistic, actually we quite like being autistic, and no, we're not going to do behavioural therapies or social skills
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
groups, and that absolutely changed my mindset into, I'm going to raise a child and then children to celebrate who they are and not to try and squash it or change it or
Yeah.
fit in. Why fit in when you can stand out?
What was that group called again?
Aspies for Freedom.
Where did you find it? Is that on Facebook?
I think, oh God, to my now great shame, I was Googling autism cures and looking at, oh my God, all the
Did you find one?
No, have you met my kids? We just,
So, if anyone is listening to this podcast hoping that we're going to tell you about a cure,
but no.
just stop listening now. It's
Switch
not.
off. Wrong
That's not what this is.
podcast.
Yeah.
However, if you want something where you will celebrate your child and you will seek out, that's the other thing, seek out other people who celebrate them rather than tolerate them, and seek
Yeah.
that connection, life will be wonderful. Mostly.
What's the topic of the week?
So our topic of the week, I wanted to do as our first one, camping, because it's something that I do a lot. But the whole format of Neuroshambles really is to look at some things that neurotypical families kind of find relatively straightforward, and we have to approach it in a very different way because of the fun and challenges that our children present us.
Mm-hmm.
And camping is a really good example for me in that my kids love camping. Uh, they absolutely because I don't know. Are yours the same in terms of George and Dottie big
No.
camping fans?
No.
No, no. Okay, so you're gonna. So obviously, because camping for my lot is almost liberating. I
Yes.
think in that when you go camping, you've got to lower the bar like really really low. So all of the things that would normally cause those little friction points in our day, like meal times and sitting at the table for meal times, we don't do that when we're camping. We kind of eat up a tree or wherever
Mm.
they are, right? And there's like sleep as well. There's no bedtime routine really when you're camping. They just sort of wait until the sun goes down. They're very good in that they sort of take themselves to bed when they feel like it, which is great. But camping, it just weirdly, the lack of routine is almost liberating for them. For kids who actually like routine,
Do you think it's low demand? Because what you're describing is an
yeah.
environment in which all of the demands on them are reduced to almost zero, and they've got that autonomy to just be wild little hellions for however long they're
Yeah,
there.
no, yeah, it absolutely is. I think not. Yes, so there's definitely low demand on the kids, and that's definitely a thing. Also we're away camping. That's what we're doing. That's the event. So there's no other stuff we're trying to squeeze into that. They've got no OT appointments, so we've got no after school clubs and no getting them to school. It's just like we're just here existing.
Mm.
So there's no agenda, which I think helps. There's also no screens, and I think that in a way, like my kids love screens,
Oh,
um
yeah.
but and it's a very important kind of part of how they regulate themselves. But if there are no screens there and no access to them, then they're not being denied anything that they want. Do you see what I mean? Because it's not an option.
See, that went wrong for us quite early on, which is part of why camping has attained a legendary status in our house. So I love camping. It's one of my I love what you're describing, the freedom, I love it. Sounds weird that everything takes a long time, so it makes you slow down.
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
making a coffee becomes a 20-minute, I'm sitting in my chair, I'm doing I love it. And the kids absolutely hate it. And I think I always call it mum goggles when you're thinking about something and you've got this rose tinted view of what it would be like.
Yes, yeah.
I had thought all of the above. Oh my lord, the freedom, the nature, they wanted Wi-Fi, and nothing but Wi-Fi
Well,
would
even when
do.
they were when they were a lot littler.
I mean, when they were a lot littler, they wanted mine were on screens, each of them from about the age of 5.
Right.
And they wanted their whatever it was at that time, their DS or their Game Boy, which they could do, but as soon as the batteries started running low, all
Oh yeah, yeah.
hell would break loose. And then, yeah, as they got a bit older, Wi-Fi. We made the mistake once. So I kept trying because mum goggles. I kept thinking, no, this time it'll work. This time we will go camping. We will have fun. Oh, dear God. So we went to this beautiful place, idyllic nature, no Wi Fi. I hadn't researched properly. There was no Wi Fi, barely any signal. And one afternoon, me and Phil, the husband, and Dottie, the daughter, sort of had a nap, had a little rest, and George was left to his own devices. And when we woke up, he'd made a sock puppet, right? Which you'd think, oh, that's amazing. No screens. He's like doing something creative. This sock puppet was called Pedo Sock.
How old was he at this point?
Like 10, 11. I don't know how, or even if he knew what pedo meant. He just knew it was something you're not meant to say. And that's the other thing we discovered that day for the first time. There's no walls. Intense.
No,
There's no
no,
soundproofing. So we're
no.
there with him shouting, "Hello, I'm Pedo Sock," and trying to attack us. And we're like, it felt like inches away from really nice, normal, middle class
Yeah.
families doing nice, normal things. And we're trying to silence a little maniac with a pedo sock puppet. So, yeah, no, that wasn't great.
Yeah, that is definitely one of the challenges of camping is being right in amongst neurotypical families who don't get your setup and they don't understand your neurodivergences, and also you are separated by canvas so they can hear everything.
Yes.
And where that really kind of gets us is the early mornings, because Otto wakes up super early.
Oh,
Like he'll
no.
wake up at like 5, and if he could be right next, he's feet away from someone with just two bits of canvas
Oh,
separating
good
them.
Lord.
So he
Yeah.
gets up and he's also got no volume control. So it's like he's either on or off for Otto. And so he'll want to start playing. And so one of us, either Tam or I, have to get up and occupy him, and
At
we sort of
5
draw
a.m. Oh,
at
Lord.
5 a.m. And try and keep him quiet, but he wants to play. He doesn't do quiet reading. Jay will just, kind of read to himself and just occupy himself. But Otto constantly needs interaction, and no one needs interaction at
No,
5 in the morning.
no.
And even fewer people want to hear people interacting at 5 in the morning.
Oh,
Um,
Lord.
right next to their heads. So um, there was one time we went to a wedding, and again, this is like my we went to a wedding where it was glamping, and it was really nice. They'd set up these really
Ah.
nice yurts. It was like, typically that's a lovely idea
Can
for
I
our
just say,
setup.
Mark, that's the most
Yeah,
middle class thing I've ever heard.
yeah. I mean, it wasn't my wedding, I'll
That's
be honest.
fabulous.
It was like, let's slum it, but not actually slum it.
Yeah.
But it was really nice because it meant that everyone could stay on site, and then it worked really well until Otto woke up at 5 in the morning,
Oh,
and we are
no.
like in amongst loads of people who've had a heavy night because it's a wedding,
It's a
right?
wedding.
And he's really loud, so I have to get him up and walk him around this massive field. I mean, I've barely slept. I'm a
Oh,
bit hungover, and I'm trying to sort of like trying to occupy him by pointing out like cows and wildlife and stuff,
yeah.
whilst passing people who haven't gone to bed yet, people who are still hammered from the party, and just thinking, what has my life become?
What is,
I used to be
yes.
one of you.
Yeah. And did you know at that point that he was autistic? How old was he?
Uh, he was, I would think, probably 3 or 4 at that age. Uh, Maybe, yeah, no, probably nearer to 3. And we didn't know because our experience. I think we didn't. We knew that Jay had a lot of energy and was very different, but we hadn't pinned that on autism at that point. But also because Jay represents so differently
Mm,
to Otto, we were like, even. I mean, it took us a while to kind of understand that Otto was autistic as well, because it was like, well, that's what autism is, because Jay is very overt and presents in, that
Yes.
quite typically autistic way in, well, what is typically autistic, that's a ridiculous statement, but in a way that it was quite obvious that he was very kind of, single-minded, and he is socially just an absolute car crash. um whereas Otto was very sociable, and so when he was having a bit of difficulty, instead of sort of acting out and being kind of abrasive and uh, you know, rude, he would just be in tears and want to kind of hide away. And so it took us a while to understand that they were two different facets of the same thing. But then, just to bring it back to the topic, uh, both of them are relaxed when they're camping. It's really, but I think Otto likes the sociability side of it because there's loads of people around who have nothing else to do,
Mhm.
so so they can talk to him and they can play with him. And Jay is just a bit more free range. He can go and wander off into the woods, or he can sort of hang out in his tent, because he's now in his own tent,
I've seen his
which is
tent, yes.
which is a new development, and it has made a big difference. And this all sort of started as a result of a less successful camping trip that we had,
What happened?
where, well, we were all in one big tent,
Mm,
and that was fine. But I think as he gets older, he needs more and more to be able to have his own space for regulating, and that doesn't necessarily need to be like really far removed from everyone, but he just needs to have his, what he perceives to be his own safe space, I guess.
mhm.
And obviously in a shared tent there isn't any of that, and Otto and India don't, they're in a tent, so there's not really any
Yeah.
kind of, there are no doors or anything, so they're just kind of hooning around the tent, and Jay's getting increasingly furious about it. And then, yeah, there was one particular episode where he just went absolutely nuts, and and we realized that it wasn't really workable. And then the last straw was this year. We went to Elderflower Fields Festival, right,
Yeah.
which you went to, and it
Yes, I
was
was there.
see, and I think for the first time we realized that Jay loves camping, but he hates people. Like, large groups of people are really triggering for him. So
Mm,
we went camping, and we go camping just us lot, and it's absolutely fine. He's totally fine. But we went to a festival, and he turned into an old man, and he's just like, he kept saying, "When are we going to leave this wretched festival?"
and the most galling thing would be the amount of money it costs to go there.
I know, I know. And to be honest, we did it for Otto because Otto absolutely loves music and he loves that environment. And we have sort of been clinging on to this idea that we can do a thing for all of us as a family. We could do
Mm,
this thing and it'd be really nice. We could do all this together and have this shared experience. But the more and more we sort of try and do that, the more we realize that actually we're going to need to divide and conquer, because not,
yeah.
the way that Jay presents and the way that Otto presents is so different that to finding a thing that's going to kind of keep everyone happy is very, very difficult. And Jay got more and more infuriated, and he would he'd try and go to bed early, and people would be at a festival, so they would be talking and drinking near their tent, and there'd be the sound of music in the background, and he was getting increasingly furious, and he'd be shouting through the tent, "Shut up!"
Oh no.
And at
Oh
one point,
God.
Tam had to stop him going out to tell off a group of kids who were chatting about football. Like, he was like, "I'm going to go out there and tell them." It's like, Jay, this is not, no,
Yes.
they're fine. It's not even 9 o'clock, dude. And we realised basically that this wasn't sustainable. So Tam agreed to take him home. So then it was just me and Otto and India there, and that was fine because they both wanted to be there and I wanted to be there. But
Mm,
it's sad for Tam because Tam enjoys festivals as well. So we kind of, Tam drew the short straw there, and that was when we decided that we really needed to get a blow up tent. because
wow.
because taking down a tent that's got poles on my own is quite, or putting up a tent with poles is an impossibility. Whereas
Mm.
actually next year I can go with Otto and India, who aren't going to help put the tent up. Let's
No.
face it. Um, and I can do that with the blow up tent without any problems. So that's my top tip if you're camping with autistics. If you go with 5 of you, don't always plan to come back with all 5 of you.
Yes, I think you have to have a flexible approach. To be honest, I'm quite envious that you ever had any help setting up or taking down the tent because
Well,
that was,
Tam has been very helpful.
yeah.
Yeah, it's Phil not that guy.
No, Phil, I mean, bless him. Whatever it is he does for work, he's really, really good at. He moves numbers around, and so he's an absolute genius with numbers. When it comes to anything, and I mean anything practical, he's hopeless. So right from the get-go, I was like, oh, let's go camping. It's going to be wonderful. I'd get there, and the three of them would just sit watching me set everything up on my own whilst moaning. So yeah, no, I never had
Yeah,
any
but
help whatsoever.
that is a particularly galling part of camping. Camping with neurodivergent kids is the lack of help you get and the sort of excess of criticism.
Oh my
And for some,
God.
because they can't wait, right? I don't know
Yes.
if yours are anything like mine, but they're so impatient. They want to get their stuff out. It's like, dude, I'm doing all the
Mm,
work.
I know.
So if you want to help, like
But
that's
they can't
great.
get that. And then when it's time to when it's time to go home, what they would do is they would so we'd wake up. I'd say, right, we'll pack up and we'll go home today. That's it. We've had enough. That I'm done. So then they would immediately go and sit in the car. This is the kids, not Phil. I'm sure Phil would have if he felt he could. They would sit in the car, and about once every 2 minutes, one of them would go, "Can we leave now?" And I'm there going, "Not really. I'm taking down this massive tent and packing up all your crap." And yeah,
Packing up takes so much longer as well, doesn't it?
oh my God. And I mean, you have to let go of so much as a parent of neurodivergent kids. But yeah, that was
Yeah.
galling. That, like,
Are they beeping the horns? Have they done that
I
yet?
think that they would if they could have.
Uh,
But yeah, that used to
yeah.
be the trigger point for me when I would finally just lose my temper about what a disaster it had all been, is that just having to do all the work and just getting a
Yeah.
stream of abuse for it.
Well, I had that because so we decided recently that Jay needed his own tent,
Mm.
and Tam and I had a tent that we went to go hiking with years ago. So it's amazing, like 2-person tent. So for Jay, it's absolutely perfect. And he was like, I'm going to pitch it on my own because again, Jay knows best. Jay believes that he's the expert at
Yes.
anything and
Hmm.
everything. So he decided that he was going to pitch it on his own. So I was like, okay, I'll let you. I also know that that's not the easiest of tents to put up, but I gave him some space to do that. And he was like criticizing the wind. He was cursing the gods. It was my fault somehow. I mean, it was like. At one point, he said, you are more ignorant than a truckload of minced beef."
I mean, to be fair, Mark, he's right. You are. He was
I
just
know, but
saying
he
it.
didn't have to say it.
Oh, he's
Uh,
excellent.
so then so then I had to sort of help him without sort of by pretending I wasn't helping him. Do you know what I mean? So I
Yes.
had to let him feel like I'm not really helping him that much. It's a very delicate balance so that he feels like he's done it on his own, whilst also not really doing it. But now he's in his own tent and it's a massive change. He's been able to just kind of go in there and read and then come out when he wants to. That makes a big difference.
Yes.
So he's a lot
Yeah.
happier there. I also remember which we helping George with a tent. So we went when we went camping with
I
you
remember
guys,
that.
and George was next to us, and he was obviously really struggling. So he takes after Phil there, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so he was really struggling with his tent. So I was like, do you want a hand? And he was like, yeah, please. And so I started sort of looking at the poles and trying to work out how it worked. He just fucked
Yeah,
off.
he
He
does
left me.
that. Yes.
He left me to it. So I did it all on my own.
Yeah, he'll do
And then
that.
he just sort of like rocked up afterwards and moved in, and that was
Yeah,
it.
he probably didn't even say thank you.
Probably not. It's fine. But again, I'm very used to that.
But
So it's
he
not a problem.
gets that from Phil, and I feel bad because I feel like I'm bad-mouthing Phil, who is just the best person in the world. But
Yes.
both Phil and George get through life by this amazing ability to charm other people into doing things for them.
I think
And
Jay has
it's,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
Jay definitely has that quality. But yeah, George is, I don't know how he gets away with it, but he will just get other people to do it and not even appreciate it.
So we're sort of talking about how difficult camping is, which does make me question why we do it.
I know.
But I think from my perspective, the kids get a lot out of it.
Yes.
And there's a place that we go every year. So uh, we've learned to not camp in very populous places as a family now. That's
Mm.
that's that's one thing we've taken from that. So if we can find somewhere that's quite relatively quiet and secluded, then everyone's happy there. I I do. I don't know if you have this, but I had a major issue this year with with PDA and working out where to pitch a tent.
Oh
Right, because
no.
so if people are listening, I need to. There will be acronyms used in this that you may or may not be familiar with as parents of neurodivergent kids. PDA is one that's going to come up a lot, which is pathological demand avoidance, which is very prevalent in a lot of autistics, I think, which basically, I think both of my kids have it, and it represents itself in kind of the opposite way, really, in that Jay uh, has to exercise control over everything. So he will just literally refuse to do anything he doesn't want to do
Mm.
unless he can see a reason for it. He will just say no, and he will be so stubborn that there's no point in continuing. So that's kind of his demand avoidance. Otto has PDA as well, but that manifests itself in he panics. So if a demand is placed on him, he can't process it quick enough. He knows that there's a response needed, and he'll just massively panic,
Mm.
and so he'll say no without really thinking about what's been offered. I could say to him, "Do you want some chocolates?" And if he's not ready for that question, he'll say no, and then a couple of seconds
Oh,
later
love
go,
him.
"Actually, yeah, I do want chocolate. I always want chocolate." So that's how it kind of manifests itself in him. So Jay's is to control things so
Yeah.
that he's kind of comfortable, and Otto's is to just so that the
Just
stress of
make it
having to
go
make a
away.
decision just
Yeah.
goes away. We also realized recently that Tam has PDA.
Oh.
So there's a lot going on in my household, and this was perfectly typified when we went camping this year. And we got there, and it was this massive field, and there were loads of places to camp. It's like, right, well, where are we going to camp? Okay,
Oh
well,
no.
this seems like a good place. Okay, so Jay's got his own tent. Tam's got the tent that we're having and we're pitching. Um, so then Jay was like, I'm going to pitch in the shade over here. And Tam was like, no, I'm not pitching in the shade. I want to be in the sunshine. So I'm going to pitch over here. And I said, well, Jay, you can't pitch over there because you're miles away
Yeah.
from us. You have to be near us. Like I'm fine with you having your own tent, but you have to be near us. And he was like, I'm pitching in the shade. And I was like, right, okay, well, Tam, can we move our tent nearer to Jay then? And Tam was just like, no,
No.
I'm pitching. So I'm in the middle going, can we just make a fucking decision, please? And I'm just getting more and more frustrated because I can't balance these two things. It's not possible.
No.
And then we get a phone call from the people we're camping with who'd pitched around the
Oh
corner, and they
no.
both went, no, but they both went, oh, fine, we'll just pitch with them.
Oh.
So it's like typifies PDA because I'm not placing a demand on them. The other
Yes.
people aren't placing a demand. They're just saying, well, this is where we're pitched. They
Yes.
both then go, well, it's not a demand, and it seems
And we can
sensible
do
to
that.
pitch with them.
Yeah.
So for God's sake, the shit I have to deal with
And
on
then
a
you're
daily basis.
exhausted before you even
Ah,
start.
exactly. Yeah. Well, it was perfectly encapsulated it. But that was a fun camping trip.
Oh.
Um,
The other thing is, there's always loads of other children around, which for
yes.
my two was something of a mixed blessing. Dottie occasionally could make a friend and play with someone successfully for a
Hmm.
few hours. George could, because George is a hedonist, so he was quite good at just getting in with the naughty. If there was like any naughty kids on site, he could get in with them and cause
Yeah.
havoc. And it's that sort of, you're being forced to interact with other families all the time.
Yes, because you've got all this time on your
my
hands as
lord!
well,
So there
and this
was
place to explore.
one of our favourite family stories. We were up at Stony Wish, and it was all going quite well. And there was this nice woman with a kind of maybe 3-year-old, and I must admit, so he was clambering about on this climbing frame thing, and I must admit, I was
So
thinking,
how old is George at this point?
this was Dot. Dot was about
Okay.
6.
Okay.
And we were sort of waiting to have a go, and he was clambering, and the mum was really hovering. So I was feeling a bit judgmental and thinking, oh God, helicopter parents. And then I realised, oh, this child only had one arm. The problem being, Dottie also realised. And Dottie went, I've just noticed he's only got one arm to the parent.
Say what you see.
Yeah, well, and the mum, to be fair, was absolutely lovely about it, and was, yes, he was born this way, so he's having to learn to do different. And I was just thinking, oh, this is lovely, what an amazing interaction, how wonderful. And then the mum said to the kid, like, come on, Henry, climb up. And Dottie said, bit tricky with your one arm. and I couldn't keep it together because it was just the funniest thing I'd ever heard. Bit tricky with your one arm. But then you have to spend another 2 days being in close proximity with these people who must hate you. Because the mum didn't laugh. She did not find that funny.
No, I can imagine. Which is why, like, because I think yes, camping with neurotypicals is in a group. You do face those challenges, and it makes it much more difficult. But this is why when you go camping with a group of neurodivergents,
Yeah,
it's a fucking joy.
it's wonderful,
Isn't it?
it? Yeah.
So just for the listeners, so Joe organises a camping trip once a year for sort of autistic families to basically go into the middle of nowhere and just let it all out. And it is unbelievable. It's so lovely that no one's judgmental.
No one cares.
No one cares. So the nonsense that goes on, because we all take joy in each other's kids as well. It's like because we get where it's coming from, and there's a shared sort of sense of humor and a shared camaraderie, I think, of the challenges that we face. That is really liberating. So I always really look forward to it every year, and my kids also look forward to it
is
as well.
great. Even Jay, even after what we shall call the incident. Do you remember the incident? So George would have been, this was like 3-4 years ago. George would have been 16. How old would Jay have been that very first camping trip?
He'd have been 6 or 7 then.
Yeah. And he there's no easy way to say this, but the report was he kicked George in the bollocks twice.
Yes. George, just to contextualise it a little bit, it wasn't out of the blue.
Oh yeah, no, George deserved it, undoubtedly.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not trying to apportion blame. I'm saying that there was a game going on. I think that George, and I don't know how complicit George was in this game. It may well have been. He was just launched upon by children. But the game was that they were trying to wrestle George over or something like that.
Yes.
And then Jay was just like, I know the way to do it. Because obviously in his brain, yes, there is a way to do it. But that is not the way that you should do it with your friends. So he decided to kick him twice in the neck.
So after the first kick, George issued a stern, don't do that again. To which, of course, Jay thought, I will. And did
well, that was
again.
A demand, right? It was
don't do that again. Well, actually, fuck you. I am doing that again. But George picked him up and threw him across the field.
He launched him like a rag doll across a field. And Which obviously, from my part, no judgment. I'm not going to wade in and go, "What are you doing?" It's like he fully deserved it. And to be honest, it did sort of dampen him down a little bit. I think in quite a good way. It's like, oh, there are consequences to my actions
This,
occasionally.
yes. It was at that moment that I knew that I loved you and Tam. Is when I went to shamefaced, going, look, I need to just let you know my massive kid, and you just both went, he probably deserved it. So, yes, camp with other neurodivergent families.
Yeah, well, there was one time where I'm woken in the middle of the night. It's like perfectly silent, and then all of a sudden, in the middle of the night, I just hear from a neighbouring tent the words, "You're a fucking idiot! You're a fucking idiot!" And there's some poor parent just trying to quieten down this child who's having some kind of meltdown in the
Oh,
middle of the night, and I'm just like, at that point, you just kind of roll your eyes and sort of try and roll over and fall
yes,
back
I'm
to sleep.
just,
And then the
yeah,
next morning, he was so apologetic. It's like,
yeah,
you're not in a place where you need to apologize.
yeah.
Seriously, we all
You're
get it.
among
And
friends.
yeah, exactly. Right. Okay. Uh, I think that's camping. I think we've
I
done
think we've
camping.
covered it. I think
Unless there's anything else.
that's.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if people were expecting that practical advice.
No,
Haven't got
no.
any.
And,
Just
but
muddle through,
no,
get
well,
it
this is, yeah,
done.
exactly. I'm not promising any advice with this podcast at all. I'm just promising stories, swapping stories of stuff we have to deal with, just so that because I think it's so easy in this setup to feel isolated when you feel, because you're surrounded by neurotypical families and you look at Facebook and Instagram and people posting the perfect pictures of their kids, and to feel slightly removed from that. So I wanted to sort of create something that people could sort of gather together and go, yeah, there's actually quite a lot of us going through this shit.
Yes, and it is actually
So
quite funny. It is.
oh, it is.
It's sort of when your first child is diagnosed, there's that tendency to think that you've been cast in a tragedy and you haven't. You've been cast in a
Mm.
comedy, and you will laugh so often at such ridiculous situations. And
Yes.
it's wonderful.
Yeah,
I
I mean,
wouldn't
it's
swap
not.
it.
Yes, yeah, and all the best comedies have some kind of pathos in there, some elements
Exactly.
of sadness. So yeah, and I think that's where we're, Tam and I are starting to. Well, we've been there for a while now of seeing the light in our situation, and just embracing that fuck it, this is us
Yeah.
mentality, and I think that really helps.
It's not all rubbish.
Okay, so the next part of the show, this is a section that I call "It's Not All Rubbish," because it's so easy to go to focus on the challenges that we face and some of the things that we find difficult. That I think is also important to shine a light on some of the more light-hearted side of things and some of the sort of the positive side of things. So one of the things in "It's Not All Rubbish" section is going to be neurodiversity champions, where I want to kind of discuss usually companies or kind of organizations that make things easier, that provide a service that just take a little bit of the burden away from being neurodivergent, or people who get it right. So the neurodiversity champion that I want to talk about this week is actually someone that you're very closely involved in, and it has been an absolute kind of godsend for Tam and I when we were kind of navigating this journey. And that is a group called Mascot, who are unbelievable. Just tell us about your kind of involvement with Mascot first, Joe.
So I have the enormous privilege of being one of the directors of Mascot, and we kind of grew from a group of parents sat round a coffee table talking about their newly diagnosed children and wondering what the fuck you're meant to do next. And we're now, I think we've got 1,600 members. We've got a really active Facebook forum where parents can just be honest and get support and
Mm-hmm.
advice. I run the program for under 14, so we try and get the kids together. We try and give them opportunities to meet each other and just be themselves and not have that pressure. But yeah, I mean, I'm biased. I think we're fantastic, and we
I mean, yeah, I endorse that
yeah,
wholeheartedly. It's amazing. It is because again, it's just allowing this space for people to be themselves, because again, like I was explaining earlier, as a neurotypical and as someone who is just like insanely kind of aware of how other people perceive us. I mean, I've got my grounding is in stand-up comedy, so that is
Yeah,
like I'm nothing if not acutely aware of everyone's reactions. So when my kids get involved and I'm in public and people, you kind of see this wave of disapproval going on around my kids' behavior. To
yeah,
go into a place where there is none of that is so liberating, and it's so lovely to kind of have that. And that's, I think, where Mascot uh, really, really helped us out in that. So Mascot, to kind of go into that environment. So with the Sunday Club was the first time where we went, and there's kids of a similar age, and they're all neurodivergent, and crucially, there's no judgment.
yeah,
So that just kind of, there's this what I kind of call the joyful disregard for convention. No, there are no rules. So, like, I mean, you were saying once that someone sort of made their kid come up and say thank you, and your reaction was so lovely.
yeah. It's like, well, you don't need to do that. I mean, you can if you want to. I won't mind, but I know they're grateful because they had a great time. And it's that just trying to get out of that neurotypical thinking about how we must behave. Because
Mm,
must we? Must kids do that?
yeah,
Does that matter?
yeah. So you're giving the kids permission to be themselves, but also you're giving the parents permission to let them, because there's
Yes.
always that feeling that you've got to sort of somehow rein them in. And I don't
Yeah.
have that when we kind of have the meetups, and that's absolutely
Yeah.
lovely. It's almost like unmasking as a parent, in
Yes.
a
I
sense
love
as well.
that.
I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a neurotypical, and I'm sort of unmasking and going, you know what? I don't have to
Yeah.
pretend that my family is anything other than what we are. And that's really lovely. So I
Yeah.
would, well, firstly, thank you for everything you've done for Mascot. And if anyone else wants to kind of learn more about Mascot, there's a Facebook group, which is amazing, and find out a little bit more about it. And there's probably other kind of autistic or neurodivergency support groups locally to you that may do a similar
Mm.
thing, but
And if
obviously
there
not as well as,
isn't, start one. It's much easier than you would imagine. She
yeah,
said,
and it is
exhausted on my knees with absolute exhaustion.
I
It's
know,
really easy. It's great.
but it is hugely appreciated,
Yeah.
and we're very grateful for it. So that is our neurodiversity champion for the first episode. If anyone listening has got any neurodiversity champions that you want to kind of recommend as well, this is normally companies that kind of do it and go, actually, for example, the Science Museum had an autism friendly session. And they do it every now and again, and my kids went, and it was unbelievable,
Excellent. Yeah.
because they open like 2 hours before the general public go in. And you've obviously got to kind of prove that you're autistic, or you've got autistic kids. You can't just rock up and
Yeah.
pretend. And every, like, the lights are up, so, and the noises are sort of reduced, so it's not so sensory. They even do stuff like turn the hand dryers off, because the hand dryers are like
Amazing.
weirdly triggering for my
Yeah.
kids and for other autistic kids. So for my kids to be able to go in there and to be able to have the run of the Science Museum when there's not so many people, and when they
Amazing.
don't have to queue up for stuff, because queuing, as we've discussed, is a
Just
major
not
trigger
great.
point for
We're not great
Jay.
at that.
uh, so I mean, like, yeah, just a big shout out for the Science Museum. But if anyone else has any kind of recommendations of neurodivergency champions, please email the show at hello@neuroshambles.com, and I'll give it a shout out, because I think it's good to spread the word of other to other people.
Tiny wins.
The next section of of the it's not all rubbish bit is the tiny wins. So this is where I want to focus on things that neurotypical families would not be a big deal for a neurotypical family, but in our setup, something that would be considered small for them is a massive win for us, and I want to kind of champion those and sort of own it and go, yeah, we're proud of that. So have you got any tiny wins for us, Joe?
I've got a huge win this last
Okay,
week or last two
wicked.
weeks. So, George, the boy, is
Yes.
20, and last
Hmm.
year he went off to uni.
Yes.
He's studying, I don't know, digital media or something, film production. Um, So the huge win is not only has he somehow scraped through the first year and progressed to the second year, he's just moved into a house share with 6 friends.
Wow.
I know.
Wow, that's
I
amazing.
know. It's do you know what's beautiful is they are all neurodivergent. They didn't
Oh,
meet.
really?
Yeah. They didn't meet through a club or a formal. They just found each other. And yeah, I am so delighted for
That's
him and
amazing.
proud of him. And I sometimes I sort of think normal, in inverted commas, families wouldn't feel this joy, wouldn't they'd just be like, oh yeah, he's in a house share.
Well, it's just a thing they do, right? Yeah, exactly. It's just a tick on the list of things that they're expected to do. And I mean, like from my perspective, like Jay wants to go to university, but he's not great with other people. So, and I see similarities between Jay and George. Like the idea that they can find their
It's
tribe
like,
and
yes.
their own little
Yeah,
little sort of group of people, that fills me with a lot of optimism as well,
yeah.
that it is possible.
Yeah, and I'm just so happy for him and that he's done it not by being in any way pretending to be who he isn't. He's done it by being unapologetically himself.
Brilliant. Oh, that's
And
fantastic.
that's
That is a
enough.
major
Yeah.
win.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
that's
yeah,
a
we're
massive
very
win. I'll
happy
take that.
this week. Yeah.
Let's celebrate that one with you.
What the flip?
All right. The other thing that I wanted to bring to this as well is the what the flip section. Now this section is almost entirely, I'll be honest, inspired by Jay and some of the things that he says, because he says very funny but really quite disarming
Scathing.
things
Yeah. He's quite
sometimes,
scathing
where
at
you go,
times.
so so what the flip is when he comes out with stuff and it really throws you just like a curveball.
Yeah.
I don't know how to deal with what you've
Yeah.
just said, so what I'm going to do is just write it down and tell people, and
I
they will
love
also see
these.
that it's a bit
Yes.
so. So I had one earlier, which is he said that I'm more ignorant than a truckload of minced beef. That was one.
Fair. Fair.
So this so the last 2 weeks, in no particular order, I had this one. When I'm older and I have a moustache and a budget, I'm going to
Sorry, a
right,
moustache and a
which is
budget, because those are the
yeah,
two
yeah,
indicators of
which
adulthood.
exactly, which is the best start to any
Oh,
sentence.
yeah, I'm all in. I am all in for the rest of this sentence.
When I'm older and I have a moustache and a budget, I'm going to parachute onto Mount Olympus.
What?
I'm like, yeah, you do you, Jay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm fully supportive of it. Oh,
Oh
so
dear.
that was particularly fun. He also said, and I still don't know how this was intended. You can trust an oyster with a jetpack as much as you can trust me.
What?
You can trust an oyster with
With
a
a
jetpack as
jetpack?
much as you can trust me.
It's how does his brain connect those
I,
things? How does it
I
go
don't
from
know.
oyster to
And
jetpack?
does that mean he is trustworthy or he's not
Well,
trustworthy?
that's the question. I mean, would
I
you,
don't
in all
know.
seriousness, Mark, if you saw an oyster with a jetpack, would you trust it? That's what you've got to ask yourself.
Probably not. So maybe
No.
that's the point he was making. Um, okay, another one from the archives from the last 2 weeks. If you actually think about it, canals cause more problems than they solve.
What? How? What problems has he ever been caused by a canal?
I don't know. I don't know, but if you follow that logic, what do they solve? I mean,
Transportation of goods in the.
yeah, but not now. I
Oh
mean,
yeah, I mean,
they
yeah, but
cease to be relevant. So
what
actually, he's pretty
he's
prescient
making.
in what he's saying.
I don't know. I think you're reaching a bit there.
I'm trying.
He's
I'm
a
trying to
child's a
justify it.
genius. He's a genius.
And the final what the flip moment uh, is when he very earnestly looked at me and went, "If you ever make me a Christmas jumper, I want it to be of a mongoose eating a sausage." And I went, "Why?" And he
Yeah.
just went, why not? And walked off.
Indeed.
That was it. Just left me with that. Just
Indeed. Why not?
why not?
See?
So,
You've got to change your
I mean,
thinking.
because there has never been a question of me making a Christmas jumper for Jay, but it's never been on the cards.
But
But
if you
just in case I am
did,
thinking of it, yeah, now I
now
know.
you know. I think he's done you a favour there.
So, if any of the listeners out there has a pattern of a Christmas jumper that is
Well,
a mongoose eating a sausage, let me know,
I'm not even sure
and
what a
I'll.
mongoose is. What is a
It's
mongoose?
it's a mammal. It's a bit ottery, I
Is
guess,
it?
but not in kind of wet environments, in more desert environments. I think
It's a
South American. I'm thinking
dry otter.
it's a dry otter. Yeah, yeah, and nor would they really come into contact with sausages. So uh, I've got a number of issues.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to unpack there, but let's just throw that whole
Right.
case away.
The final thing I wanted to do in this section, because as I say, we spend a lot of time looking at the challenges that we have with our kids and focusing on some of the difficulties. I wanted to take a moment for you to tell me the best things about your kids.
Oh, God, where to begin? George is a hedonist. He just grabs life with both hands and wrings every last bit of joy out of it. And if you let him, he takes you with him.
Hmm.
He goes to he regularly goes to punk gigs at an anarchist vegan club where he's just got this big circle of anarchist friends, and it's the perfect environment. So that I just love that hedonism and that joy. Um, and Dottie, I was thinking about this the other day. So Dottie's nearly 17 and she wants to spend time with us. And I look
Hmm.
at my friends and my family who've got similar age girls, and their kids don't want anything to do with them. They're off with their mates and their vapes and their whatever it is youngsters do. And I love that. I love that we get to keep them a bit longer and that we get to have that really close, really excellent relationship
Mm.
because of her being autistic, not in spite of it. So, yeah, I would
Well,
not swap.
yeah, great. Yeah, I think Otto is similar in that he's never wants to leave home.
Yeah. And why would they?
He's going to live with for the rest of life. Whereas Jay, I think he'll be
Oh,
out
he'll
as
be
soon as
with
he can.
George. He'll move into George's house share and be down the Cowley Club at punk gigs doing God knows what.
I could totally imagine that. As long as he doesn't kick George in the nuts, I think they'll be all right.
Yeah. Hopefully he's learnt his lesson on that one.
Right, so that's it for our inaugural episode of Neuroshambles. All that remains for me to say is, firstly, thank you so much, Joe,
Oh,
for
you're
being our very
welcome.
first guest, and for everything. And thank you to the audience for listening. This is where I do the bit about the socials, because we've got a Facebook and Instagram and Reddit. We're also on Threads, not Twitter, because why would you endorse that nonsense? And we've got loads of other episodes planned. So we've got episodes on birthday parties, on holidays, on special interests, leaving the house, sleep. So if there are any topics that you want me to discuss with some of our guests, please email us at hello@neuroshambles.com and suggest anything, and I'll see if I can fit it into the schedule. Finally, if you like what you hear, please like the podcast on your podcast platform, subscribe to it so that you know when a new one drops, and also tell people who you think might enjoy it and might kind of get something out of it. And give us a review if you feel that way inclined as well. Only if it's a nice one, obviously. Don't say it's rubbish. I'm not letting Jay have access to this at all.
This is
So
dreadful.
all of those things are going to help us spread the word and hopefully get more people into our neuroshambolic tent, which would be lovely. Now, I always find it really difficult to sign these things off. I think it's important to sign off a podcast with a sort of a regular thing. And I can't just say, bye, see you next
You need a
time. Or stuff
catchphrase.
well, I was thinking about this, and this sort of perfectly dovetails with this episode, because this is something that happened when we went camping. right? And there was one time where we were camping, and Otto was playing with another kid in the tent next door to us. And we were playing the whole weekend, and they were getting on pretty well. And then when it came time to pack away, we packed away, and we sort of went over to the family that they'd been playing with the whole weekend, and they went, "All right, bye, see you later." And Otto just turned around and he went, "Have a nice life." Um, and I was like,
That's
"Why did
beautiful.
you? Why did you say have a nice life?" And he went, "Well, I'm not going to see them later, am I? I
Fair
mean, I've only
enough.
just met them, and I'm not going to see them later, so that's not true. So if I say have a nice life, then that's the right thing to say." And I was like, "Yeah,
Absolutely.
actually,
Yeah.
you're completely correct." So I think, inspired by Otto, this is that's going to be my sign off for this podcast.
Excellent.
So all that remains for me to say now is thank you very much, Joe. Thank you to the audience for listening, and
Mm.
have a nice life.